In our headlines on this Tuesday, January 27th, here in South Korea. In a social media post on Monday, US President Donald Trump says he's raising his tariff on South Korea to 25%, citing failure by the legislature here to promptly approve the bilateral trade deal reached in July and reaffirmed in October. And as expected, Trump's sudden shift in US tariff on South Korean goods into the American market is rattling industries here, including the auto industry, as a significant portion of its sales target the US. And the US leader dispatches his border czar Tom Homan to head the immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis, following talks with Governor Tim Walz amid the shooting death of a second American citizen in the city by ICE agents. It was a hectic morning, to say the least, for South Korea today, as government officials, lawmakers and business leaders sought to better understand a social media post by US President Donald Trump announcing a raise in US tariffs on South Korea to 25%. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday morning, Korea Standard Time, that he was unilaterally reversing a tariff reduction agreement made last July, raising rates on certain South Korean goods from 15% to 25%. Writing on Truth Social, Trump explicitly blamed the National Assembly, stating South Korea's legislature is not living up to its deal. He declared that due to the legislative delay, he was increasing South Korean tariffs on autos, lumber, pharma, and all other reciprocal tariffs. Under the agreement, Seoul pledged a $350 billion investment package, but the initial $20 billion installment has stalled. With the large amount of investment agreed, the Assembly has proposed a special bill for this investment but has not made progress since the proposal, with no passage in sight for now. The True Social post wasn't the first warning, it turns out. Local media reported that just 2 weeks ago, U.S. Charge of Affairs James Heller sent a formal letter to Deputy Prime Minister for Science Bae Kyung-hun demanding Seoul honor the joint fact sheet signed last year. This also comes as just last week, South Korea's finance minister told Reuters not a lot of investment can be made under the current foreign exchange situation, at least for this year. Experts see this as one of the triggering factors for the timing, especially with the U.S. Supreme Court's decision on Trump's tariffs coming up.
Trump argues that if the Supreme Court rules the tariffs unconstitutional, the U.S. would be forced to issue massive refunds to trading partners like Japan and Europe. This is not just the tariffs imposed, but also the investment packages, and it's a scenario he claims would be economically damaging.
Amid rising tensions with European nations over Greenland and the U.S. continued push and pull with Canada, Trump is also likely using Korea to send a warning message to other partners.
I believe there is a significant aspect of sending a signal to other countries as well. It conveys the message we are watching and warns them to implement terms faithfully and swiftly.
There is also a political dimension. Facing headwinds ahead of the midterms, particularly regarding immigration controversies in Minnesota, President Trump may be seeking a political win. However, analysts caution that this is likely a secondary factor compared to the stalled trade deal. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, Cheongwade, for its part, says it remains committed to its trade deal with the U.S. and will respond, quote, calmly to the latest remarks on tariffs by the U.S. leader. Our correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump's unexpected social media message on Tuesday morning scrambled a response meeting at the top office in Seoul. After the meeting led by Chief of Staff for Policy Kim Yong-bum and National Security Advisor Ri Song-nak, the Blue House said in a readout that the government will relay its commitment to carry out the Korea-U.S. trade deal while responding to the renewed tariff uncertainty in a calm manner. It noted that tariff policy officially takes effect only after administrative actions are taken, such as a Federal Register notice. The office seems to be studying what's behind Trump's message, insisting on raising auto and reciprocal tariffs on South Korea to 25%, up from the 15% agreed on under the Allies trade deal. Trump wrote that Korea's legislature was not living up to the deal, but it's unclear whether he's complaining solely because of the legislative process or if there are other reasons beneath the surface. Tuesday's meeting centered on examining follow-up measures to the Special Act on Managing Strategic Investment between Korea and the U.S., which is now being reviewed at the National Assembly. For close communication with Washington, Industry Minister Kim Jong-un, who's now in Canada for a business trip, will fly to the U.S. as soon as possible to meet Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Trade Minister Johan Gu will also travel to Washington soon to meet his U.S. counterpart, Jamieson Greer. The meeting was attended by the Trade Minister as well as senior officials from the Finance and Foreign Affairs ministries. Chief of Staff Kang Moon-sik and the Industry Minister remotely joined the meeting from Canada. Watchers expect the top office to refrain from immediately responding to the Trump-style unpredictability, but rather closely watch the situation in a calm manner, as the office noted. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And the National Assembly has been quick to respond to Mr. Trump's social post of a U.S. tariff hike on South Korea. The ruling Democratic Party emphasized that the bilateral trade deal did not include a deadline for parliamentary approval. It pointed out that the deal was based on the introduction of legislation rather than a complete ratification, while adding that 5 bills related to Korea U.S. investments are pending at the relevant standing committee. In sharp contrast, the opposition People Power Party found fault with the Lee Jae-myung administration, arguing that it had failed to address the need for parliamentary approval of the trade deal. It also called for an emergency parliamentary probe into the matter. And while Mr. Trump's intentions behind his call for a higher 25% tariff rate on South Korea remain unclear, their potential impact on markets here, especially that of cars, appears very clear. Our Park Chun-han explains.
U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to raise tariffs on South Korean imports from 15% back to 25% could impact Korea's major export sectors, such as automobiles. For South Korean auto giants Hyundai Motor Company and Kia Motors, the U.S. is a crucial market. In 2025, Hyundai, Kia, GM Korea, and Renault Korea exported nearly 1.65 million vehicles to North America, with Hyundai and Kia alone shipping over 1.19 million. Credit rating agencies and securities firms in Korea estimate that a 10% difference in tariffs could result in at least 3.1 to 4.4 trillion Korean won, or about 2.14 to 3 trillion US dollars in earnings losses for Hyundai Motor Group, which includes Kia Motors. In fact, the two companies already absorbed about 4.6 trillion won in losses during the second and third quarters of 2025 due to high tariffs, despite achieving record U.S. sales of over 1.83 million cars and a market share high of 11.3%. A sudden jump in tariffs would inevitably create major disruptions in sales planning and uncertainty. Moreover, if automakers pass the higher tariffs on to consumers, Korean cars could lose price competitiveness against major auto exporters such as Japan. Although the tariff news overnight shocked the local markets with them opening below Monday's close, the Kospi on Tuesday closed above 5,000 for the first time in history due to a sharp rise in semiconductor stocks, which are exempt from the tariff increases. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea has inked 6 memorandums of understanding with Canadian companies as part of its bid for the Canadian Patrol Submarine project, valued at 60 trillion won. According to the Trade Ministry, on this Tuesday, the MOUs were signed during an industrial cooperation forum in Toronto on Monday, local time. The two sides touched upon partnership in future mobility sectors and sealed MOUs covering key sectors, including defense, steel, artificial intelligence, and rare earths. The meeting came as Canada weighs specific options, including technology transfer, as potential conditions in its submarine procurement. North Korea launched an unidentified projectile toward the EC on this Tuesday, according to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Authorities are analyzing the projectile's specifications, including flight range. Japan's defense ministry also announced that the regime had launched objects believed to be projectiles, which fell outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. If this is confirmed to be a ballistic missile, it would mark the first in 23 days and the second launch this year. The regime previously fired missiles toward the EC on January 4th. And Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi appears to have called North Korea a nuclear-armed state. Speaking on a TV Asahi News program on Monday, Takaichi touched upon Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its close ties with China, as well as the strengthened relations with North Korea. Calling all three nuclear-armed states, she claimed Japan must reinforce its diplomatic efforts as it faces these states across its border. U.S. President Donald Trump is reshuffling the leadership of his immigration crackdown in the city of Minneapolis following the second fatal shooting of an American citizen there by ICE agents. Our An Sung-jin has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump stated that he will dispatch White House border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota. This comes as tensions escalate following the killing of 2 people during protests against federal immigration raids. On his social media Truth Social on Monday, Trump wrote that he will be sending Homan to Minnesota, adding that he knows and likes many of the people there, and that he will report directly to Trump himself. Homan oversees border security and immigration enforcement. Trump's decision to dispatch Homan follows criticism of the enforcement tactics used by Greg Bovino, the U.S. Border Patrol chief leading immigration operations in Minnesota. According to sources from AP, Bovino and some agents are expected to leave Minneapolis as early as Tuesday. This comes after Alex Preddy was shot dead by a Border Patrol agent in Minneapolis the day before. Federal authorities described Preddy as an armed agitator, though witness accounts show Preddy was holding a phone.
Nobody in the White House, including President Trump, wants to see people getting hurt or killed in America's streets. Saturday's shooting remains under active investigation by Homeland Security Investigations and the FBI.
During the same press briefing, Leavitt stated that Trump talked with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who has been critical about the administration's immigration enforcement policies. The two allegedly had a very good conversation and appear to share similar thoughts and perspectives. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, the first phase of the peace plan between Israel and Hamas has come to a promising end, with the return of the remains of the last hostage paving the path for transition into phase 2. Our Lee Sing-jae has details.
The Israeli military said Monday that it had retrieved the body of the last remaining Israeli hostage in Gaza. The body is that of Master Sergeant Ron Gavili, who had been missing since the war began and was the final unresolved hostage case under the current ceasefire agreement with Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the recovery an extraordinary achievement, saying it brings closure to a painful chapter for Israel. The return of Gavili also brought relief for his family members.
Yeah, we feel relief. We came home, and it's the best thing that happened to us. Thank you very much.
The military said it began searching a cemetery near Gaza City early Sunday after intelligence was clarified over the weekend. A senior military official said the cemetery was located near the so-called Yellow Line, an area still under Israeli control under the ceasefire terms. Hamas's armed wing said it had provided mediators with detailed information about Gavili's location, allowing Israeli forces to narrow their search. Hamas spokesman Hazam Qasem said the discovery confirms the group's commitment to fulfilling the ceasefire agreement, adding that Hamas continued to update mediators until the remains were recovered. President Trump also confirmed Hamas's involvement. In an interview with Axios on Monday, Trump said the search and identification of the body was extremely difficult and that Hamas made a significant effort alongside Israel to determine the location of the remains. He called on Hamas to now follow through on its commitment to disarm. Meanwhile, Israel says it will reopen the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt in a limited capacity later this week. Officials say the reopening of the crossing and the return of Gavili's body were the final major hurdles in Phase 1 of Trump's plan. Attention can now fully turn to the second phase, which involves demilitarizing Gaza and establishing a new governing authority and security force for the territory. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
As Korea and France celebrate 140 years of friendship this year, we'll sit down with the French organizer of a similar celebration 10 years ago for her thoughts on bilateral cultural exchanges back then and now. Foreign Affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young files this report.
A new year of discovery is unfolding in France as cultural exchange with Korea hits new dimensions. As Seoul and Paris mark 140 years of diplomatic relations in 2026. Scores of exhibitions, performances and exchanges will highlight both classic and contemporary culture. For years, director Agnès Benayer has been the driving force of bilateral cultural ties. She was the chief authority in charge of the 130th anniversary celebration. Collaborations have since broadened well beyond film. Benayer says the two nations are kindred creative spirits.
I think Korea is a rare country where art is truly reinvented, creativity revisited, while remaining deeply rooted in tradition and culture. France and Korea share this passion for a millennia-old culture that is very open to the future, not afraid to evolve, and enriched by cross-cultural blending.
Through the common language of heritage and innovation, various art exchanges are flourishing.
In France, I believe what works first and foremost is when events create bridges between the two cultures through dialogue. When we presented The Creation by José Montalvo with the National Ballet, it produced something very beautiful, very unprecedented. More recently, Kim Soo-jae's installation at the Bourse de Commerce was magnificent, especially her mirror work in the Rotunda. And the French have a great curiosity for craft, for Korean design, Korean culture in general, from hanbok to knot-making traditions. We have come to love and continue to discover many things about Korea. There's curiosity about Korean heritage, civilizations we know little about, whether the Kingdom of Silla or Joseon.
Cooperation continues between leading national museums, and the Pompidou Art Centre's Seoul branch opening this year is highly significant, she says. Benayer was a former director at the prestigious Paris-based institute.
It shows that Korea has become a central place for contemporary art. 10 years ago, that was less the case. But there is an important art market in Korea now. The presence of Pompidou testifies to that.
Today, the director oversees partnerships across 14 Paris museums, handling over 1 million works. The Sanusi Museum alone holds nearly 250 Korean works. It will highlight Korea this year through exhibitions on contemporary art and Joseon literature. More broadly, Benayer is keen to see partnerships blossom across new realms, in particular digital art.
There will be a virtual reality exhibition created by the Musée d'Orsay around the Impressionists. Also, a first online webtoon festival. We're seeing new artist residencies too. The Villa Busan is dedicated to visual arts. In 2026, we will open the Villa Bucheon, dedicated to graphic arts.
This compares to a decade ago, when Korean culture was mostly unknown across France. Benayer launched nearly 500 events in both countries on the 130th anniversary, drawing almost 7 million visitors.
It was a deeply enriching experience. We hoped then to foster cooperation between institutions for sustainable collaboration. And it's happening. For 10 years now, Korea has continued to captivate the French public from K-dramas such as Squid Game to K-pop, K-food, and K-beauty. More recently, many French people discovered K-literature through Han Gang's Nobel Prize. These dimensions already existed 10 years ago, but only a few recognized it. For us, we could see Hallyu would continue to evolve. That is a great strength of Korean culture.
Under the theme Creativity, Opportunities, Solidarity, over 100 programs across 20 cities will take place in both countries throughout 2026. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Paris.
This is the world now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. A ferry sank off the southern Philippines early on Monday, killing at least 18 people. Philippine Coast Guard officials report the ship carrying more than 350 passengers encountered technical trouble and tilted over before taking on water near Basilan Island. Rescuers pulled 317 survivors to safety and recovered 18 bodies. Navy ships and aircraft are searching for roughly 24 believed to be missing. Authorities have launched a full investigation to determine the exact cause of the disaster. Gunmen in Mexico's central Guanajuato state killed 11 people and injured 12 others on Sunday following a soccer match. According to authorities, the armed attackers opened fire on a post-game gathering in the city of Salamanca. Salamanca's mayor said the motive was not immediately clear and called the attack cowardly, adding that a woman and a child were among the injured. The state attorney general's office promised a thorough investigation. State police have reinforced security across the area as they hunt for the perpetrators responsible for the attack. The European Union has launched a formal investigation into social media platform X following reports that its AI tool Grok had generated non-consensual sexualized deepfake images. Brussels said it will examine whether X met obligations under the Digital Services Act to limit illegal content risks, including manipulated sexually explicit images that could amount to child sexual abuse material. Regulators also widened an existing probe into X's recommendation systems after the platform said it would use Grok to help decide which posts users see. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
A blast of freezing air is moving in from the north this afternoon and chill winds are getting stronger. Cold wave warnings are now in place for northern Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and parts of northern Chungcheongbuk-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces. Cold wave advisories have also been expanded around central areas and parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province. However, it's going to get even colder as we head toward the end of this week. In Seoul, morning temperatures will plummet to around -10 degrees Celsius tomorrow and Thursday, and could fall as low as -12 degrees on Friday. Other areas will have a cold morning tomorrow, with Chuncheon at -14 degrees, Daejeon at -9 degrees. Highs will rise only to -2 degrees in Seoul, 3 degrees in Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju. In addition, dry weather warnings are in place along the East Coast, with advisories covering the Seoul metropolitan area and much of the eastern regions. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.